difficult being underwater. So I'm always underwater financially. She's always about pulling me, saving me. No. She'd like to sometimes. Thank you so much. So be careful, maybe on. I'm not sure.
So everybody seems to be here. I think I'm going to get started. Sure. Nancy, are you ready? Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order. This is the town meeting for the town of Hanover, New Hampshire, May 10th, 2022, starting at 7:05 p.m. My name is Jeremy Eggleton. I'm the town moderator. I'd like to introduce Nancy Carter, one of our select board members, to give the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
I'm going to give some brief introductions for those who don't know all our select board members. Starting on my left, Joanna Whitcomb, who is the secretary of the board. Nancy Carter, member. Bill Garrity, member. Peter Christie, select board chair. Athos Rassos, vice chair. And lastly, Julia Griffin, who's our town manager. And Julia, would you be so kind as to introduce the department heads, please?
My pleasure. And you applaud for me, but I'm no better than these guys are right down front. So I'm going to introduce them to you because they make my job much easier as your town manager. Norm Bernache, our assessor. Norm, just wave your arm. And behind, Corey Stevens, IT director. Marty McMillan, fire chief. Tina Stearns, administrative services director. Ruby Simon, Howe library director. Jeff Metzler, Aetna librarian. Peter Kobaki, public works director. Dave Stewart, Human Resources Director. Rob Hausman, Planning, Zoning, and Codes Director. John Sherman, Parks and Recreation Director. and Charlie Dennis, Chief of Police. And I want to introduce Doris Yates as well, who's our community nurse, sitting next to John. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Do I have a motion to commence the reading by reading Article 12 of the warrant? So moved. Do I have a second up here? Seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. The motion passes, and we'll start. To read Article 12, I'd like to introduce Joanna Whitcomb. Yes. I've been asked to see if there is a motion on the floor to be permitted to only read the article one time. So moved. Do I have a second? Second, Mr. Gardner. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Great, thank you.
Article 12.
Article 12. Welcome, everyone. I nominate the following persons for the following offices. Advisory Board of Assessors for one for a term of 3 years and one for a term of 2 years. Mac Gardner for 3 years and John Brayton, 2 years. 3 fence viewers, each for a term of 1 year. Rob Graybill, Matt Marshall, and Sarah Packham. 2 surveyors of the wood and timber, each for a term of 1 year. John Richardson and Robert Keene, and 1 Pine Park Commissioner for a term of 3 years, Rob Hausman. Such other officers as the town may judge necessary for managing its affairs. Is there a second? Do I get to say that or do you?
You go for it.
Okay, is there a second? If anyone has any questions, you can read about all of these illustrious officers on starting on page 35 of your town report.
Thank you. I'd like to open the floor for debate on Article 12. Does anyone wish to opine about Article 12 and the nomination of these officers? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Article 13.
Article 13, I move that the town vote to modify the elderly exemption from property tax in the town of Hanover based on assessed value for qualified taxpayers to be as follows. For a person 65 years of age up to 75 years, increase the exemption to $96,000. For a person 75 years of age up to 80 years, increase the exemption to $144,000. For a person 80 years of age or older, increase the exemption to $198,000. To qualify, the person must have been a New Hampshire resident for at least 3 consecutive years, own the real estate individually or jointly, and if the real estate is owned by such person's spouse, they must have been married for at least 5 years. In addition, the taxpayer must have a net income of not more than $36,800, or if married, a combined net income of less than $51,700 and own net assets not to exceed $125,000, excluding the value of the person's residence. This article represents a recommended modification of the current exemption for the elderly from $80,000 for a person 65 to 75 years of age, $120,000 for a person 75 years of age up to 80, and $165,000 for a person 80 years of age or older, from net income of not more than $32,000 if single, $45,000 if married, and from net assets not exceeding $75,000. This article would be effective April 1st, 2022 for for the 2022 tax year. So, yes, I'll step back.
Do I have a second on that motion for Article 13? I have a second here. And do you want to speak preliminarily? Okay, to open debate on this issue, I'd like to call Carrie Callahan from the Hanover Finance Committee to offer a few thoughts, and then we'll open it to the floor.
Thank you. So I'd actually like to speak to Articles 13, 14, and 15 in the interest of efficiency, respectively exemptions for the elderly, disabled, and blind. First, I'd like to thank Kari Asmus, Chair of the Finance Committee, for flagging this as an issue to be revisited, and also to thank the Select Board and Town Administrators for the work and support in updating these articles. While the Finance Committee typically focuses on budgets and capital appropriations, we also look to tax impacts and tax relief, such as in these articles, which is a part of our work. Since 2008, when last amended, inflation is up by more than 30%, making these adjustments especially important in the view of the committee, which fully supports this update. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further thoughts, opinions, questions? Yes, ma'am? Do you mind just state your name and where you live? I think you'll need to come down to the mic.
And the mic will need to come down to me. I'm a little concerned about the definitions of overlapping ages, 65 to 75 and then 75 to 80. What if someone's 75? Which category do they fit in?
Any further debate? Oh, you can address that. Okay. Yes, ma'am, right there. Okay. Okay, doesn't look like. If you could just state your name and where you live.
Sure, Kimberly Hartman, 18 Mountain View Drive. Actually, I need to bring the mic up to me. So I actually asked that exact question at the public hearing in front of the board, and what I understood the answer to, and I'm happy to be corrected, is that April 1st is the effective date, and so therefore that would be the exact date for the 75, and this is actually the same language, just numbers updated as previous, I guess, policy. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment on Article 13? Does the board wish to respond in any way? Okay. So hearing none, I'll call the question. So all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Article 13 carries. And to read Article 14, Joanna Whitcomb.
Article 14, I move that the town vote to modify the exemption for the disabled. The exemption, based on assessed value for qualified taxpayers, shall be increased to $198,000. To qualify, the person must have been a New Hampshire resident for at least 5 years and own and occupy the real estate individually or jointly, or if the real estate is owned by a spouse, they must have been married for at least 5 years. In addition, the taxpayer must have a net income of not more than $29,900, or if married, a combined net income of not more than $40,200, and own net assets not to in excess of $125,000, excluding the value of the person's residence. This article represents a recommended modification of the current exemption for the disabled of $165,000 and would be effective April 1st, 2022 for the 2022 tax year.
Thank you. Do I have a second, please? We have a second right here. And would anyone like to speak on this particular article, Article 14? Thoughts, questions, concerns? Great. I will call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Article 14 carries. And to read Article 15, Joanna Whitcomb.
Article 15, I move that the town vote to adopt the provisions of RSA 72:37 for the exemption for the blind from the assessed value of residential real estate for property tax purposes. This statute provides that every inhabitant who is legally blind shall be exempt each year for property tax purposes from the assessed value on a residence to the value of $35,000. This article represents a recommended modification of the current exemption for the blind of $30,000 and would be effective April 1st, 2022 for the 2022 tax year.
Thank you. Do I have a second? I have a second here in the front. Anyone want to offer questions? Opening the floor to debate. Questions, concerns, thoughts on Article 15? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Article 15 carries. To read Article 16, Selectman Athos Raphios.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $5,000 for deposit into the Land and Capital Improvements Fund, and to fund this appropriation by authorizing the withdrawal of this amount from the unassigned fund balance. The amount appropriated is the equivalent of 50% of the total collected in land use change tax in the fiscal year 2020 to 2021.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Do I have a second here in front? Seconded. And would anyone like to offer thoughts, concerns, questions, or debate on Article 16? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion carries. Article 16 carries. Article 17, Mr. Rossier.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $5,000 for deposit into the Conservation Fund, and to fund this appropriation by authorizing the withdrawal of this amount from the unassigned fund balance. The amount appropriated is the equivalent of 50% of the total collected in land use change tax in the fiscal year 2020 to 2021.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Here's a second. Opening the floor to debate on Article 17. Any thoughts, concerns, questions, opinions? Going once. Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion carries. Article 17. Article 18, Mr. Rossius.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $32,000 for deposit into the Municipal Transportation Improvement Fund, and to fund this appropriation by authorizing the withdrawal of this amount from the unassigned fund balance. This amount is equivalent to the total transportation fee surcharge for each motor vehicle registered in the town of Hanover, $5 per vehicle, during fiscal year 2020 to 2021.
Thank you. Do I have a second on Article 18? A second here in front. Thank you. Any questions, concerns, opinions, thoughts on Article 18? Opening the floor for debate. Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Article 18 carries. Once again, Mr. Rossius for 19.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $23,600 for funding the construction of a sidewalk segment along Reservoir Road from Hemlock Road to the western entrance to the Strong Trail, and to fund this appropriation by authorizing the withdrawal of this sum from the Municipal Transportation Improvement Fund. This will be a non-lapsing appropriation per RSA 32:7 Roman numeral 6, and will not lapse until these improvements are complete or until June 30th, 2027, whichever occurs sooner.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second on Article 19? We have a second over here on Article 19. Opening the floor to debate. Any thoughts, questions, concerns, Opinions? People love sidewalks, I'm hearing. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Sure. The question is, where is the strong trail? I think a description of what we're talking about here, right?
So the Strong Trail comes down from Grass Road Phases 1 and 2, McDonald Drive, through the woods, down between some properties to bring kids to the race school down at Reservoir Road. The sidewalk segment ends right along adjacent to the race school on the race school side. We want to continue a sidewalk segment on the opposite side of Reservoir Road from Hemlock up to the base of the driveway where the Strong Trail ends to make it safer for the kids to walk along Reservoir Road once they get off the Strong Trail and then use the crosswalk to get to the elementary school.
Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of Article 19, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Article 19 carries. To read Article 20, I'd like to introduce Select Board Member Cannon. Carter.
Long day. It's a long day, yes. Yes, this wonderful man behind me has been here since about 6 o'clock this morning. So in Pamplona, they run the bulls, and in Hanover, we read the figures. Patience, everyone. This is an incredibly long warrant, and it's on page 24 of your town report. I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,173,002 and authorize payment into existing capital reserve funds in the following amounts for the purposes for which such funds were established. Ambulance Equipment Capital Reserve Fund with funding coming from the Ambulance Fund, $82,567. Building Maintenance and Improvement Capital Reserve Fund with funding to be raised through taxation, $174,300. Dispatch Equipment and Dispatch Center Enhancements Capital Reserve Fund with funding to be raised through taxation, $34,181. Fire Department, excuse me, Fire Department Vehicle and Equipment Capital Reserve Fund with funding coming from the Fire Fund, $243,500. Highway Construction and Maintenance Equipment Capital Reserve Fund with funding to be raised through taxation, $443,534. Parking Operations Vehicles and Parking Facility Improvements Capital Reserve Fund with funding coming from the Parking Fund, $174,599. I apologize. Let me read that number again. From the Parking Fund, $174,955. Excuse me. Police vehicles, I practiced all this at home in front of my mirror. Police vehicles and Equipment Capital Reserve Fund with funding to be raised through taxation, $114,000. Road Construction and Improvements Capital Reserve Fund with funding to be raised through taxation, $36,000. Sewer Equipment and Facilities Improvements Capital Reserve Fund with funding to come from the Wastewater Treatment Facility Fund, $388,757. Water Treatment and Distribution Equipment and System Capital Reserve Fund with funding to come from the Water Utility Fund, $481,208. Do I have a second? Thank you, sir. Yes, please. Oh, I apologize.
That's okay. I did recognize a second, so thank you.
I'm on a roll.
Before we get into public debate on this question, does anyone on the board want to speak to it? Sure. Okay, Ms. Osmus.
Hi, my name's Kari Asmus of Etna, and I'm one of the very few people who attended, I think, every possible meeting of the select board concerning the different budgets. I guess the thing just now, when I was sitting there and I heard the amount for the parking fund, I see that it says 174,955, but I thought at the last select board meeting that was actually changed, and I'm trying to find it, to the 900, et cetera, or 90,000. And I did just have it. But do you all remember when you decided that you were going to take some of the expenditure items out, and then that was going to also decrease the amount? And I could be thinking of the amount that is, yeah, maybe 21. Yeah, I think I may be, yes. Okay, so it is saying the 174.
Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thank
Again,
you.
I was
Yeah,
just sitting there and we had changed that so many times.
I know,
wanted to double check.
and we've been over these numbers oodles of times, Kari, so.
Okay, further questions, concerns, thoughts, debate? Yes, ma'am. Would you mind coming down to the mic and stating your name, please, and your address?
Hi, my name is Rebecca Paquette, and I live in downtown Hanover. And I wonder, when you mention vehicles, I'm just asking, will any of those vehicles be hybrid or electric?
Julia? You can speak from the chair if
Of course
that's more
I can,
convenient.
I'm sorry. Rebecca, when you get to the appropriation of monies from the capital reserve, a vehicle for the town engineer will be a hybrid, an EV, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And in terms of the two police vehicles, they're hybrid police package vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts, concerns, questions, or opinions? Yes, sir.
Ian Sim, Dairy Lane. Quick math suggests you're raising about 700,000 through taxation. Could you give us a comparison to last year? How much was raised?
Hold on, Ian, I've got to go to the summary pages. So it's not broken out by capital funds, Ian, and regular appropriations. So if you give me a couple minutes, I'll be able to come up with that calculation, but I've got to do some quick math.
Any other, while Julie is doing that math, any other thoughts, concerns, questions, opinions? Do you need your answer before we vote on this, or?
I might need my answer, but others may not.
No, that's fine. We'll take a minute. Everybody just relax.
I'm not sure where I'm going to find it quickly, so hold on.
Everybody enjoy the warm weather today? I didn't know I'd be emceeing the event as well as leading us through the warrant. My limitations as an MC are obvious, actually.
So, Ian, we're spending from capital reserves approximately just over an additional $500,000. But the issue I've got to do the math on is what portion are coming from tax proceeds and what portion are coming from other sources. And I'm going to need some time to figure that out.
In the meantime,
If I may, then I'll withdraw the question, but let it be noted that for the first time in recorded history, the town manager wasn't immediately able to answer the question.
Yeah.
Bill, did you have a question?
I'm Bill Fischel. I'm on Reed Road, and my wife and I were asking. We don't recall seeing the voting on these various property tax exemptions for blind and so forth. Is that now a state requirement that we have that, or did we just decide to do it? Have that been done before?
Joanna?
It was done was in 2008.
The last time it was
that
done.
we updated it.
Okay, so
it's been
yeah.
a long time,
So-
and we were remiss in not.
The 2008 sounds like yesterday to me. Thank you.
It was.
Thank you. So, any further thoughts or questions on Article 20? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? None opposed. Article 20 passes. To read Article 21, Ms. Carter.
So, with your forbearance, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $1,541,051 for the purposes listed below, and to authorize funding these amounts by withdrawal from the listed capital reserve funds in the following amounts. This is on page 25 if you're following along in your book. Building Maintenance and Improvement Capital Reserve Fund, RWB, that's the Black Center, roof replacement, and the Department of Public Works security and parking improvements, flooring and window replacement, HPD, the Police Department, flooring replacement and lighting replacement, $268,500. Fire Department, Vehicle and Equipment Reserve Fund, Utility One vehicle purchase, HVAC improvements, those are your heating and cooling units, metal door replacements, plumbing renovations, $308,801. Highway construction and maintenance equipment, Capital Reserve Fund, bulldozer major repairs, construction of liquid calcium chloride storage building, truck 5 replacement, that's a 6-wheel dump truck with plow, $263,100. Parking operations vehicles and parking facility improvements Capital Reserve Fund, 911 call boxes, cellular mesh network, parking facility and lot security cameras, facility joint repair, $94,650. Police vehicles and equipment Capital Reserve Fund, police cruiser replacements, 2 of them, $97,000. Water treatment and distribution equipment and system Capital Reserve Fund, Greensboro Road tank repainting, SCADA and instrumental upgrades, treatment module replacement, WFD and compressor head replacements, utility engineer electric vehicle purchase, $509,000. This will be a non-lapsing appropriations per RSA 23:76 and will not lapse until these specified purchases are complete or June 30th, 2027, whichever occurs sooner.
Thank you, Nancy. Do I have a second on Article 21, please? Second up there. Thank you. Opening the floor to debate on Article 21. Any thoughts, questions, concerns, opinions? Yes, sir. Please state your name and your address if you can.
Donald Collish, East Hemlock Road. Mr. Moderator, I note that the black building roof needed to be replaced. And I was wondering, since it seems like it's much less than 20 years since that building went up, why we need a new roof after such a short period of time.
Julia?
It's actually been 19 years done, and based on wear and tear, it needs to be replaced. We're using a new technique now for re-roofing our membrane roofs that we think will hold up better than the previous technique. And quite frankly, we found with the construction of the community center, could have been higher quality ultimately than what we got. So we think this will be a better product overall, and we hope we'll get at least 25 years out of it.
Thank you.
And by the way, I have an answer for Ian.
Hey.
Ian, we're spending $148,385 less in taxes raised for capital projects this year, this proposed year, as opposed to the current year.
No motions for reconsideration. Thank you. Okay, so any further debate on, yes, thank you, ma'am.
Hi, Kim Frost from Aetna, and I just wanted clarity on the difference between Article 20 and Article 21, both of which sound like they are about raising and appropriating funds, and then the first one doesn't have anything about them coming back out again. The second one does, and it goes till 2027. So could you just tell me the difference between the two?
Go ahead.
So Article 20 is the appropriation of monies into the various capital reserve funds, Kim, or savings accounts. So all we're doing is depositing money in toward future capital purchases. Article 21 is taking money, appropriating money that we'd put aside years ago from sets of capital reserve funds to buy specific pieces of equipment or to implement specific capital projects. So one is setting aside money in savings and reserve, and the other is spending that money.
But then so the use of the term raise and appropriate the second time is just a fluke.
We always run into this question at town meeting, and the state makes us say it this way.
Thank you. Any further debate on Article 21? Thoughts, questions, concerns, lack of clarity, anything? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of Article 21, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Article 21 passes. To introduce Article 22, Mr. Garrity.
Good evening. I move that the town vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Select Board and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Council 93, Local 1348, Public Works Department employees, on March 21, 2022, which calls for the following increases in salary and benefits at the current staffing level. For year 2022-2023, estimated increase, $84,682. And further, to raise the appropriate sum of $84,682 for the 2022-2023 fiscal year, such sum representing additional costs attributed to the increase in the salaries and benefits required by the proposed agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels in accordance with the most recent collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you, Bill. Before we move into debate, do I have a second on this? Thank you. Second down here in front. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine. Bill's going to introduce Peter.
So we'd like to give you some additional background on this particular article, but before we do that, I'm going to ask Peter Christie to step up and give some general information on wage issues and some different decisions that were made by management and approved by the board.
Good evening. Managing with unusual uncertainty. Try saying that 5 times in a row. Managing with unusual uncertainty was a theme in last year's budget and continued into this year as well. Being a union contract year, perhaps the biggest uncertainty was staffing cost. And I want to give you some more detail relative to staff compensation that was not directly included in the bargaining agreement, but was contingent upon those agreements being accepted. Wages and benefits represent about 70% of the budget, and the Select Board is very involved in compensation decisions. At the beginning of each negotiation season, the Select Board and Town Manager meet with our consultant Matt Upton. Matt is very experienced and represents many communities in union negotiations. He has invaluable insight into what other communities have done or are thinking to do. The Select Board and Town Manager discuss with Matt the outcome we hope to achieve, get his input, and then move forward with a plan. This year's plan was driven by several factors. Perhaps foremost was that last year, the unions responded to our concerns about the uncertainties in the year ahead by agreeing to a contract with no cost of living increase. That was not the case in many towns. Fortunately, our fears were not realized, partially due to the budgetary discipline of staff, and the Select Board felt that some sort of payback or catch-up was appropriate this year. The town also anticipated that the unions would enter the negotiations asking for a significant cost of living increase based on the 7% year-to-year increase in the CPI index. Affording that high a COLA would have required a tax rate increase greater than what the Select Board felt the town would support. The town ultimately proposed a one-time, non-recurring payment of $1,000 to all union and non-union staff, and an additional $500 for all staff who are at the top of their scale and thus are not eligible for step increases, and a contract with a 3% COLA. The one-time payments total $174,500 and will be paid from a previous health trust rebate and thus does not impact this year's tax rate. We were gratified when the unions agreed to the offer. A theme that was recurring in our budget hearings was the concern by department heads relative to filling vacant positions. This is a particularly serious problem for police and dispatch, and they are now 6 below their desired staffing level. Responding to the shortage of police and dispatch has required extensive overtime. In recognition of this, the town instituted a $100 a week critical staffing payment for qualifying personnel in those departments until those departments return to normal staffing levels. The additional payments will come from salaries saved in unfilled positions and thus are fully accounted for in the proposed budget. Bill will now talk more specifically about the collective bargaining agreements. Or if there's questions, I'll take them now.
Yeah, why don't you?
Thank you. I feel just a little bit better being able to see everybody and not just having my back turned. So my name is Kari Asmus, again from Aetna. I'm the chair of the Hanover Finance Committee, and I am right now speaking in that capacity. I'd like to follow in the footsteps of my colleague, Carrie Callahan, and speak to 3 articles at once so that we don't end up repeating ourselves. So given the current inflationary environment, the amazing effort of staff these past 2 years, and other factors, the Finance Committee voted unanimously to support the 2% steps and 3% COLAs contained in these contracts. At the time, we understood that the cost of living adjustments would begin on employee anniversary dates, and that few, if any, employees would experience the full 5% increase in the coming year. All things considered, this struck us as more than reasonable, reasonable being our normal standard. We did not, however, know of all the payments that would be made outside of the contracts, and therefore we were not able to take them into consideration when we voted our support. We regret that we cannot now represent what the actual increases or range of increases would be. That said, the Finance Committee has long maintained that the town and the schools need competitive salary scales that allow them to attract and retain the quality of staff that our community desires. And the committee believes that we need to keep that forefront in our decision making. Further, we continue to be grateful that because of our employees, our town weathered the vagaries of the pandemic and we thank them for that.
Thank you, Bill. Are you going to speak again on this at all? Yeah, I will. Okay. So thank you. That would have been some general discussion, and then Bill Garrity is going to add some specifics as to Article 22.
So what I'd like to do is clarify, the vote before you is for this article and the next two articles are only for new money required for the negotiated salary increase, which is explained on page 38 of your town report. So the new contract is for only 1 year. The new contract provides a 3% cost of living increase effective July 1 and a 2% step increase on the employee's hire anniversary date. So that's what the motion is for. The information that Peter shared with you, as he explained, is non-budget added, it's funded, and will not have an impact on the tax rate. So again, maybe a little confusing, but open for questions or clarification.
Okay, thank you. So the motion on the floor is Article 22. Any other questions or concerns or opinions or debate? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of Article 22, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Article 22 carries. To read Article 23, Mr. Garrity.
I move that the town vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Select Board and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Council 93, Local 3657, Police Department employees, on April 4, 2022, which calls for the following increases in salary and benefits at the current staffing level. Year 2022-2023, estimated increase, $32,700. And further, to raise and appropriate the sum of $32,700 for 2022-2023 fiscal year, such sum representing additional costs attributed to the increase in the salaries and benefits required by the proposed agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels in accordance with the most recent collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you. Do I have a second for Article 23? A second for Article 23. Second over here for Article 23. Any further comment?
So again, just to clarify, what the vote is for is just the amount of money of $32,700, which would be new money for next year's budget.
Further questions, comments, concerns? Yes, sir, in the back. Please come down and state your name and address.
Hi, Peter Bouchard, Dairy Lane. Just with the mention that we're down about 6 officers on the police force, I was hoping that maybe the police chief and town manager could go on record to what their thoughts of why this is happening. I think the nature of the country right now, there's a fleeing of police officers from major cities to quaint towns like Hanover, so it's odd that we are seeing down when other towns like ours are seeing the influx of officers coming to towns like this.
Thank you. Julia first and maybe the chief after.
So, Peter, we've seen a number of officer departures over the last year. Some have gone to work for the state police, which for reasons that I've never quite been able to understand, given the nature of the work that state police officers do, why that's so attractive to young officers, but it is. And because the state police has a competitive salary package and they have so many vacancies, once somebody expresses an interest right now in working for the state police, it's fairly likely they'll get the job offer. So I think a couple of our officers went to the state police. We lost one officer to the profession altogether, made a decision that policing was not what they wanted to do. And we had one retirement, one resignation and I believe one that went to work for another police jurisdiction. So what we're struggling with right now in the profession is multifaceted challenges. Because there are a shortage of officers, and it's not solely the case that they're fleeing the big city and coming to work in rural areas. A lot of urban police officers don't necessarily see northern New Hampshire as a particularly attractive place to work as an alternative to working in an urban area. They may move to a smaller community, but not necessarily a colder small community. And they're also, we're competing with some pretty attractive salary offers that some jurisdictions that are in worse shape than we are making to officers, multiple tens of thousands more than we're paying, with very high signing bonuses and retention bonuses. We made the decision not to knee-jerk to sort of an arms race to hold on to officers, but in fact, what's funded in the proposed budget before town meeting in the next article is conducting a new classification and compensation study so we can look at all of our town employees' salary levels and not just police officers. In fairness, there's a lot of competition in multiple areas of municipal work and a real shortage of employees and more than just policing. So we want to be careful and thoughtful about this rather than simply getting involved in the pay arms race for police officers.
Thanks, Chief. Maybe a couple words.
Yeah, I'll try not to repeat what the manager talked about. And of course, it is a nationwide problem, and it's not just police officers. It's healthcare. It's every profession is affected. You know, certainly people leave for their own reasons. We've had two, as Julia said, leave to go to the private sector. Some that have gone to the state police where there's more opportunities. It sounds like a question a little bit why Seattle PD doesn't come to Hanover PD potentially. I think a lot of times when people Google Hanover and they say house prices, they probably just go to the next page and look somewhere else. Even though there's a lot of good opportunities that we offer here, I think that is something that plays in people's mind when they're not familiar with the community. They go in, they look what the salary is to bring someone here, and they sit down with their wife or their partner and look, oh, what's housing like? Gee, we can't afford to live there. So I think that's probably a big problem too of why we don't see that type of movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns, opinions? Hearing none, we'll call the question on Article 23. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Article 23 passes. Mr. Garrity, Article 24.
I move that the town vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Select Board and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 3288, on April 4, 2022, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level. Year 2022-2023, estimated increase, $28,337. And further, to raise and appropriate the sum of $28,337 for the 2022-2023 fiscal year, such sum representing additional costs attributed to the increase in salaries and benefits required by the proposed agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels in accordance with the most recent collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you for Article 24. Do I have a second, please? Yes, second over here. Thank you.
So again, just to repeat, what you're voting on here is just the new money that's reflected in these increases within the contract, not anything else.
Article 24. Any thoughts, questions, concerns, opinions? Opening the floor for debate. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of Article 24, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Article 24 passes. To introduce Article 25, I'm going to introduce the chairman, Mr. Christie.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $28,239,746 to pay the operating expenses of the town for the 22-23 fiscal year, for the purposes set forth in the town budget. The sum does not include the funds voted in any preceding or succeeding articles.
Thank you. Do we have a second on Article 25? On Article 25, here's a second in front. And would you like to voice your statement on that before we open the floor? You're going to give your statement on the...
Yes, I'm ready to talk about the budget.
Yeah, go for it. Thank you.
Good evening again. Before getting to the budget, I wanted to say a few words about why the board withdrew an originally proposed warrant article concerning a possible leash ordinance. I understand that this has been quite a discussion around town. A request for the board to consider a leash ordinance came up early last summer and was taken under advisement. State law simply says that you must have your dog, quote, under your control. It does not define control and stops way short of requiring a leash. State law also defines a two-step process that a town must follow to adopt a leash ordinance. Step one is to adopt RSA 466:31 at a town meeting, and step two is for the select board to adopt a specific ordinance. The board initially voted to put the RSA on the warrant this year, but reconsidered when we saw the actual language of the RSA in our final review of all the warrant articles. The RSA is poorly written, to say the least, and we found ourselves debating its meaning. Not a good sign. We became concerned that putting it forward on its own would lead to an unhelpful debate about the RSA rather than a helpful debate on the pros and cons of a leash ordinance. We decided to move to Plan B, which is to engage the town in a broad discussion of what a draft ordinance might include and to provide that as background for the potential adoption of the RSA. The idea being to encourage discussion of the draft ordinance rather than the RSA itself. I might add that at this time the Select Board has differing views on this issue, and so I predict a healthy debate town-wide. On the budget. First, I want to bring you up to date on the Brissett Fund. You'll remember that the fund was established in 2016 thanks to a bequest from Lou and Ann Brissett, the owners of Lou's Restaurant. The original bequest was around $3.6 million, and even after funding several important projects, has grown to $4.5 million as of June 2021. And this year spun off $260,000 in earnings. The Brissetts intended the fund to be spent aggressively with a withdrawal rate of 5% on special projects that otherwise would have to be delayed or could not be funded all through the normal budgeting process. This year's budget request from the Brissett Fund totals $465,000, which includes the $260,000 that the fund spun off this year and $205,000 carried forward from prior years. During our budget hearings, 2 projects were identified for FY23, including a 2-year commitment of $100,000 a year to the Hanover Improvement Society's Campion Rink renovation, and $40,000 to the Pine Park Association to help fund substantial trail improvements in Pine Park. Since the budget hearings, the board has approved $20,000 to support merchants who are participating in our outside dining. That money will cover a portion of their expenses to conform to our new parklets ordinance. The board is also considering a request from the Friends of Oak Hill, think Fort Sayre, to contribute a total of $200,000 towards a $5 million project to provide snowmaking and grooming at Oak Hill for cross-country skiing. If that request is approved, that would leave $105,000 for the Select Board to allocate to other worthy projects if they come to our attention in FY23. Managing the Percent Fund is a shared responsibility with the trustees of trust funds. The Select Board has the responsibility to identify worthy projects. By state law, the trustees are responsible for the investment of the fund and to assure that the money is spent in accordance with the terms of the trust. Together, we have developed a spending policy that is intended to preserve the buying power of the trust while still conforming with the desire of the Persets that the trust be used aggressively and not as a rainy-day fund. Major projects that have been already funded or are planned by the Percent Fund include $30,000 for the community nursing program, $137,000 for a sustainable director, $130,000 for an emerging engineering technology director, $200,000 towards the purchase of Mink Brook Community Forest, $200,000 for Campion Rink, $200,000 for Oak Hill, $40,000 for Pine Park, and $20,000 for outdoor dining. Lou was a founding member of the Improvement Society and a great supporter of Campion Rink and a restaurant owner on Main Street. So I think he would be particularly pleased with those two grants. These are all substantial contributions to the betterment of Hanover, and learning how to properly manage the fund has been a fun upscale challenge for the Select Board and the trustees of trust funds. More on the budget. In November, the board set a guideline of 3.5% to 4% increase in the tax rate, and the budget proposed tonight is at 3.5%. As I mentioned when discussing Article 22, managing with unusual uncertainty was a theme in last year's budget and continued into this year as well. Fortunately, we are coming out of FY22 in better shape than we had projected. On the income side, motor vehicle registrations and parking fund revenue, amongst others, are coming in better than budget. On the expense side, the department heads are doing a great job in holding down expenses pretty much across the board. These result in our projected undesignated fund balances being in better shape than we had predicted. We have already discussed in previous articles the resolution of staff costs, which is the biggest uncertainty going into this year's budget. Thank you for supporting those articles. This budget continues our commitment to sustainability and the work of the Sustainability Committee by funding additional conversion of town facilities to heat pumps. This year we completed the solar field out near the water plant, which means that the town now generates all of its own electricity needs. Thanks to last year's vote to move forward with aggregating the purchase of clean electricity with some 18 other towns, Hanover will be able to provide nearly 100% clean electricity to all town residents, hopefully in 2023. That is also very significant. The next goal is to be off of fossil fuels by 2050, as we move to buy only electric vehicles as they become available. That technology is coming along, but more slowly than we would like. So the large truck funded in this year's budget is unfortunately not electric. Managing our undesignated fund balances is also critical this year. We continue to try to use UDF for only one-time expenses, which can be a challenge when our needs and desires exceed our tax rate target and temptation calls. $470,000 of general fund undesignated fund balance is used in this budget, but even with this, the fund is still in its desired range. Our capital reserves also remain strong, but we have been advised by suppliers of projected cost increases in the 5 to 10% range. which when compounded over many years for big-ticket items, will be a real challenge and require additional future contributions above those currently projected in the CIP. The town is also staring at a $5 to $10 million bond issue in the near future, as the regulatory requirements to remove nitrogen and phosphorus from our wastewater is now almost certain. We do have some bonds coming to completion, and hopefully there will be some help from the feds and the state. Stand by. On a separate note, this year's budget does not address how the town will spend the $1.2 million already coming our way over 2 years because of the ARPA federal grant, nor another possible significant sum as a result of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This is intentional, as we made the judgment that we needed to understand the full picture before committing to funding projects with tax dollars that otherwise might be paid for from federal grants. Ideas of how to best allocate these one-time windfalls are abundant and will be sorted out soon. That being said, we did receive approval for 2 projects via federal earmarks, thanks to the support from our federal delegation, including $271,000 to fund the replacement of Liberty-owned high-pressure sodium streetlights with town-owned LED fixtures. Thank you, Congresswoman Custer. And $350,000 for construction of a multi-use path from Chase Field to the race school. Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Hopefully I've given you some sense of the challenges and successes in the proposed budget. For those who want more detail, it can be found in the town's annual report or in our budget books. Again, this budget calls for a 3.5% tax rate increase and hopefully earns your support. Before closing, as always, I want to thank our department heads and town staff who performed above and beyond this past year and throughout the COVID challenge. A recurring theme during our budget hearings was department heads thanking their staffs for working through the very challenging past 24 months. Along with town staff, our volunteers also went the extra mile to keep their areas of interest alive and thriving. We also appreciate the support of the Finance Committee, who were particularly helpful in identifying some errors in our early budget. Let me stop here and open the floor for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we open the general floor, I'd like to call on Ms. Osmus for the Hanover Finance Committee perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is still Kari Asmus, and I'm still the chair of the Hanover Finance Committee. The committee's full statement is on page 70 of the annual report. I would like to start this evening by introducing my colleagues who have done an incredible job this year. They are Select Board Member Bill Garrity, School Board Member Kim Hartman, and she did a wonderful job both as a school board and as our Finance Committee member. Members at large are Carrie Callahan, Matt Gardner, who does double duty on the Advisory Board of Assessors, Herschel Knocklis, our rookie, and Jeff Ives, who I don't think is here tonight, but he is our secretary and has been our quiet keel for 6 years. He is stepping down, and if he were here, we would definitely ask that we all give him a great thank you. 90 years ago, the Finance Committee was voted into existence at a town meeting, probably not too dissimilar from this one. And it is an honor for us to carry on the tradition of service to the Select Board and the residents of Hanover. We invite interested individuals to attend our meetings, typically on the second Monday of the month, or to take advantage of some other opportunity to bend our ears. For those of you for whom we are a bit of an enigma, the Finance Committee members are appointed jointly by the town and school moderators, And as decided by town meeting vote, our job is to provide advisory review and monitor the budget process, interpret, analyze, and summarize the budgets, to educate, and of course, to opine. So without further ado, during our public meeting on March 24th, the Hanover Finance Committee voted unanimously to support the proposed town budget as presented in this warrant article and all the previous articles, indicating a town blended tax rate of 3.6%. This is an average increase which varies, as shown on page 82 of the annual report, from 3.17% for properties in the in-town hydrant rate to 5.29% for properties on the far side of Moose Mountain. This variation is greater than in a typical year, and we do not expect to see it repeated in the future. Although everyone, including the select board, would have liked to have seen a lower increase in the tax rate, the 3.6% is at the low end of the original range that they contemplated. By funding, or the funding in the fiscal year 23 budget covers the current level of services provided by the town, so it's a maintenance budget, and does not raise public dollars for new initiatives. We also saw a tightening of estimated expenditures on a number of line items. We do note, however, as did our select board chair, that for a second year in a row, the budget proposes to use significant one-time monies from the undesignated fund balance to support ongoing expenses and dampens what would have otherwise been a 5.6 tax rate increase. This is not consistent with town policy. Nonetheless, the Finance Committee supports the usage owing one, as our chair said, of fund balance even after this drawdown that is expected to remain above the targeted rate. The prospect of federal monies that may allow for a smoother weaning off of these funds, and the prospect of lower than anticipated expenditures due to longer than usual vacancies in open positions, reflecting the current job market. Looking forward, we can see immediate challenges, as does everybody: volatile fuel costs, high inflation, an unstable state revenue base, and of course, continued turnover in key positions in town administration and governance. Times like these require careful fiscal management, but the Finance Committee would also like to suggest to the Select Board that it take time to evaluate how it might improve the budget process and transparency in an era when we expect to see new faces who may not immediately grasp the old ways, and when it will be more important than ever that we all communicate and work well together. Looking further into the future, our community has ambitious goals revolving around renewable energy, affordable housing, conservation, sustainable planning, and infrastructure upgrades. Essential to the vitality and resiliency of our community, these efforts will entail substantial investment, and we urge the Select Board and administration to carefully plot the multi-year fiscal trajectory to keep it manageable for taxpayers. In closing, the Finance Committee appreciates the opportunity to have been a part of the budget review process and thanks the Select Board and Town Administration for their hard work. We would also like to take this opportunity to salute the long-standing service of Town Manager Julia Griffin, whose deft skills and good cheer will be missed.
Thank you. Any further questions, concerns, debate on Article 25? Hearing none. All in favor of Article 25, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Article 25 passes. And before we move on to Article 26, I do want to call Mr. Christie up on that last point that was raised by Ms. Asmus.
I think I know why many of you came out tonight, and we appreciate it. There's one other event to celebrate, as we know, and this will hopefully not be Julia's last town meeting, but it will be her last as our town manager. After 25 years, Julia is retiring. What a ride. People always ask me, how are you going to replace Julia? Simple. We can't. Please join me in recognizing this exceptional human being. Julia, please come forward.
So first of all, I want to recognize my husband, John Steidel, who's sitting up there all by himself in the right-hand corner. Because at the end of the day is when he sees me. And I'm not always at my happiest or best at 6 o'clock at night after a long day. I have to say, never did I expect when I came to my very first town meeting. It was before I had actually started as town manager, and I had my son Christopher with me, who was all of 4 weeks old. And I sat over where Suzanne Prentice is sitting right now, praying to God he didn't need to be nursed during the meeting, not being sure how the community would feel about a nursing town manager up on the seats, and that he wouldn't fuss. And he didn't. He slept through the entire town meeting, and he's now 26 years old and thriving. I didn't think I'd be here for 26. It would be 26 years the beginning of August, but my last day is going to be June 30th, so I'm missing it by a month. But, and I say this all the time, but I'm absolutely sincere about this. Part of the reason that this community has managed to keep me happy, satisfied, and gainfully employed working for all of you is because of the amazing volunteers in the community who make all of these things happen. It is, and as I look at this room, I see a lot of you that I've worked with all these years who've staffed our planning boards, our zoning boards, our conservation commissions, our Sustainable Hanover committees, our bike walk committees, our Parks and Rec committees. It goes on and on. The knowledge, the commitment, the support, the unbelievable number of hours that you all commit to this community is what makes this a really fun community to manage. And in addition, I've worked for 16 different select board members over my almost 26 years, and they have been to a person amazing bosses because they've let us do our work. They don't try and micromanage what we do. They respect our professionalism. They know their roles as policymakers, and they're incredibly supportive, thoughtful, and wise. And then there's this department head team that I introduced at the beginning of the meeting, and a whole lot of folks who came before them who've since retired or passed away, who have made it possible for your town manager to work on a lot of her own fun projects because they didn't need me to micromanage them. And that's what's really kept me intellectually satisfied in this community for 25 years and 11 months is the ability to manage my own projects and to work closely on certain issues that were important to me, that I knew were important to the community. And this town is deceiving. It's a city in town clothing with a lot going on and an Ivy League institution that makes for some challenges, but we are a leader in the state in a lot of areas, and it's because the community allows us to move forward in leadership capacities, and we have great volunteers who staff who make that possible. So thank you all for supporting us for the time I've been with the town. John and I aren't leaving in the community. We'll remain here as residents, but you will not see me on the sidelines as manager pro tem. That is absolutely verboten in my profession. So I will step aside. I'll be available if staff needs me to answer a question, but otherwise you'll see me rescuing plants that are desperately needing a drink of water from Walmart or Home Depot, and taking care of my gardens and my critters. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody. That was great. Before we move on to our last article, I do want to announce the results of the ballot questions that were voted on throughout the day today from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. There were 1,353 ballots cast. For the Select Board, Mr. Rossius was reelected with 1,100 votes. For trustee, let's hold the applause just to the end so I can get through it. We all appreciate it. But for trustee of the Etna Town Library, Kathleen Heimberg with 1,082 votes. For moderator, myself with 1,025 votes. For the supervisor of the checklist, Aileen Ann Chaltain with 1,064 votes to 9. Roberta Bobby Hancock, 1,067 votes. For town clerk, prevailed. And for trustee of the trust funds, there were 145 write-in votes. Nobody ran, but Sally Boyle managed to come up with 31 of those votes, followed by David Millman with 14, and then a scatter of remaining. So Sally Boyle did not run for this office, but it ran for her. Article 2 passed by 1,061 to 75. Article 3, and you can refer obviously to your town report here for the warrant article. Article 3 passed 1,152 to 93. Article 4 passed 1,105 to 135. Article 5 passed 1,086 to 157. Article 6 passed 1,115 to 99. Article 7 passed 1,097 to 116. Article 8, submitted by petition, was disapproved by a vote of 997 against and 274. That's 274. Article 9, submitted by petition, was also rejected with 1,030 no votes and 250 yes votes. Article 10 was rejected with 1,029 no votes and 251 yes votes. And Article 11, submitted by petition, was approved 775 to 565. So, do I have a motion to transact any other business that may legally be brought before this town meeting? Do I have a motion from the floor to transact? Yes, thank you. So moved. And do I have a second? Thank you. Seconded. Any debate on this issue? Yes, would you like to speak?
I would like, what's the issue?
Article 26, to transact any other business that may legally be brought before this town meeting.
I wanted to bring business, but I thought somebody brought something.
Say again?
I wanted to bring business before the
You're welcome to speak. Just state your name and your address, please.
My name's David Vincelette. I live at 93 Lebanon Street in Hanover. 2008 days ago, this town put my family and my friends in chained enclosure on our property and held us there for over 2 years before Robert Hausman came down and finally opened our fence. This is a violation of our constitutional rights. It wasn't just myself, my family, and my children, but there were people in the homeless shelters that we were taking care of. Jalen Dubose, Idris Richardson, Aaron Johnson, a Dartmouth student, Derek Dubé, Aubrey McAllister. These people are all held. I know we all said the Pledge of Allegiance, and it says something at the end about liberty for all. 2008 days later, the police still have not issued a report. All of these selectmen you see before them, I came to them. During the 25 months we were being held down there, without sufficient water, electricity, firewood, food. And these people all refused to open up our driveway, fire lane. I was waiting for hip replacement surgery at the time. I'm a 25-year veteran in the United States Army. I don't deserve to be held hostage in the town I served for 23 years in uniform. There's something wrong in this town, something stinking wrong. These people have lied to me. Peter Christie lied repeatedly and said all of my questions going to the board were going to be answered in writing. He has never, ever, not once, ever responded to any of the questions that he said he was going to respond to. I've been lied to, my family's been abused, and I've had enough. Charlie Dennis is a shame to his uniform and to his oath of office.
Mr. Vincelette, is there something you'd like to put on the floor for
I'd
action tonight?
I'd like the town to request that the FBI do an inspection, an investigation of how on earth government officials can hold people hostage in violation of state and constitutional rights, in violation of state law RSA 133.3, restraint of freedom, and that would be a good start. But I would like the FBI to be requested because they're the people who are actually supposed to investigate when government officials break the law.
Okay, so I'll construe that as a motion on the floor. Is there a second? There being no second, the motion is rejected. Thank you, Mr. Vincelette. So, returning to Article 26. Yes. This is debate on Article 26, sir. Yeah, thank you.
So just I want to follow up on, Julia mentioned about our town being a leader in many areas. And there's an area I guess I'd love to challenge the town to and consider. And it's really this line here that we have here, which is folks that can vote and folks that can't vote in town. And to vote in Hanover, there's three things. You have to be 18, you have to be a United States citizen, and you have to be domiciled in the state of Hanover, or in the town of Hanover. However, I'm asking to consider that we have a lot of fellow neighbors that aren't U.S. citizens, but this meeting is very important to them. They pay taxes, they own houses, the zoning affects them, but they're not able to vote. So I guess if you look at Article 11 of the New Hampshire Constitution, all elections are to be free, and every inhabitant of the state of 18 years of age and upwards shall have equal right to vote in an election. Each person shall be considered inhabitant for the purpose of voting in the town, ward, or unincorporated place where he has his domicile. No person shall have the right to vote under the Constitution of the state who has been convicted of treason, bribery, or any willful violation of election laws to the state or the United States. Furthermore, federal law 1996, the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigration Responsibility Act of 1996, stated that it is unlawful for any alien to vote in any election held solely in part for electing a candidate for the office of President, Vice President, President-elector, Member of the Senate, Member of the House of Representatives, Delegate from the District of Columbia, or Resident Commissioner. Again, doesn't address anything at state or local levels. This issue has come up if we go across the border in Vermont. Montpelier and Winooski has now allowed non-U.S. citizens to vote in their elections. The city of New York City also allows that. There's several towns and municipalities in Maryland that allow it as well. So I guess I just would ask us to consider, do we want to continue to require that people have to be a U.S. citizen to vote in something that's not at the federal level, but it's very important to everybody?
Thank you. And do you mind just stating your name and
I'm sorry,
address so that we can get it for the minutes?
Peter Bouchard on Dairy Lane.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks, everybody. Any further debate on Article 26 to transact other business? Sir, was that a motion, or were you trying to get the town to consider these issues in the future? Okay. Doesn't sound like it was a motion, but thank you, Jeff. Any further debate on Article 26? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Macri. I live in McLean Hall. I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming out and voting today. Lots of us worked really hard on all the things on the ballot and really appreciate your trust and support in our Article 11. I think it's a good example of how students at Dartmouth College and the other residents of Hanover can work together to solve our issues, and I think it's a great sign for our future. So I appreciate that. I know the past 2 years have been difficult, but I think we have a bright future ahead, so thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Any further thoughts, comments, opinions, suggestions on Article 26, other business? Okay, all in favor of Article 26, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Article 26. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. We have a motion here. Seconded? Second in the back. Thank you very much. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll see you next year.